Issues in the name of Deputy Martin Ferris, who wishes to discuss the proposed closure of the salmon draft fishery on the River Feale in County Kerry. Deputy Ferris.
Minister, the 13th of December was the closing date for submissions regarding the proposed closure for the River Feale, obviously the Gale and the Brick as well. This affects approximately maybe 50 or 60 people that's actively involved in that fishing sector. There's 27 licences now currently operating on that river, down from over 50 licences in a number of years since 2011. Many of those involved are part of a generation, are generational fishermen. Their fathers before them, and maybe in some cases their grandfathers, fished that section of the river. I know one man currently who was almost 90 years of age, and he was even fishing this year. So it is a tradition, it's part of their heritage, it's part of what they are. The reason for the proposed closure for the 2019 season is down to the fact that for conservation purposes. Well, I have to say that the fishermen themselves that have been fishing from 1997 right through up to this year have consistently play their part in conservation purposes, and effectively they are reduced to a tagging system that started in 1997. They reduced their fishing period by 6 weeks from that year, and now they're fishing approximately 36 days in the year, about 5 hours a day. That's the total fishing that they are doing there. As I said, there was 51 licences in 2011. There's now 27, and the total number of fish that was taken this year by the fishermen, based on their quota through a tagging system, was 400 for the fishermen and 360 for the people involved in the angling. It's a counter system on board the river, which is monitored and run by the IFI, and that counter system this year recorded 3,487 fish that went up on it. And the 3,487 fish, it was determined there were 46 fish short of being allowed to fish in the coming season. Now, the counter system is approximately, I'd say, 6 to 8 feet wide. That is it there, Minister. That counter system is what determines the fish that goes up the river. And there is a 15% either way. In other words, there's probably 15% more than that went up according to the IFI. Now, where that counter system is, it's approximately 100 yards wide the river. And this year, because we had an awful drought as well, and then we had a flooding system and a high tide system, there's no doubt, because of the passes of the fishing, that a lot more than the 3,487 fish went up that river. No doubt whatsoever, because it's 100 yards wide. There's 3 fish pads on that such a river, and only one of them there's a counter on. So I dispute that totally. That argument be put forward by the IFI that it has to be closed because of the counter system. Do you know it's? I say it's a traditional way of life. The fishermen themselves have worked tirelessly to conserve it. They have behaved impeccably in that regard. They've done everything possible that was requested of them, and it's going to create an awful difficulty, further difficulties to that part of rural Ireland. Up the road in Ballylongford, post office gone, in Creamery gone from Ballyduff, over in Clashmail also gone. And that is probably one of the few industries that is left there, and albeit only 6 weeks, as it's all is 36 days fishing. I think it would be a terrible mistake to close it, Minister, and I hope you would look favourably on the arguments that's been made by submissions from the fishermen, from the community, and from myself here today.
Thank you, Deputy. And Inland Fisheries Ireland, the IFI, is the state agency responsible for the conservation, protection, management and development of Ireland's inland fisheries and sea angling resources. IFI manages salmon stocks on an individual river basis, as each of Ireland's 147 salmon rivers, including river sections and estuaries, have its own genetically unique stock of salmon. IFI is supported in its management role by scientific advice from Ireland's independent Standing Scientific Committee, comprising scientists from a range of organisations. IFI also has regard to the advice from the International Council for the Exploration of the Seas and EU legislation, most notably the Habitats Directive, under which salmon habitats are protected. Science and management assessments of each of the distinct stocks, including the river Feale, are carried out every year, with IFI engaged in extensive stock monitoring, which feeds into the SSC's annual reviews. The SSCs use data, including counter data, rod catch, catch and release, and any commercial catch over the previous 5 years, and an average of the 5 years' data is used to estimate expected returns for the coming year. The use of a 5-year average ensures that a good or bad year does not have a disproportionate impact on the stock assessment in any single 1 year. The annual wild salmon and sea trout tagging scheme regulations made under the Inland Fisheries Act 2010 provide for the management of Ireland's wild salmon and sea trout fisheries by IFI. Specifically, the regulations provide for any surplus, if any, to the established conservation limit that can be harvested either commercially or by rod and line from those rivers identified as open for harvest. These regulations are revised each year, taking account of advice from IFI, the Standing Scientific Committee, and any submissions received during the 30-day statutory public consultation period. Statutory notice was given on the 14th of November 2018 of the intention to make the draft wild salmon and sea trout tagging scheme regulations 2018 to provide for the management of wild salmon and sea trout fishery by IFI from January the 1st, 2019. A copy of the regulations, which are made every year, is available on the Department's website and is open for public inspection at the offices of the IFI division of the Department in Cavan and also at the offices of IFI around the country. The scientific group uses a number of data sets in assessing the salmon stock on the river Feale. The stock is assessed using the fish counter located at Scartley Dam, did I pronounce that right? In addition, the commercial catch in the Feale and the rod caught salmon killed figure below the counter are added to fish count figures to calculate the total annual salmon returned to the river. The counter is a one-channel counter operated on the crump weir, which was installed to assist fish passage over the large weir. I am advised that this counter provides consistently accurate data. A new camera was installed earlier in the summer of 2017 for counter verification purposes. The counter figures is increased to take account of the very small number of salmon that may bypass the counter by going over the weir in high water conditions or ascend an old fish pass channel on the north bank, as advised by local Inland Fisheries Ireland staff who monitor the operation of this counter. It is the experience of local IFA staff that salmon generally do not ascend the weir in high water conditions. It should be noted that 2018 was a very dry year and there was very few occasions when the Scartley weir was overtopped. The scientific group advises on the 1C winter, which is designated 1SW, stock component, and also the multi-C winter, MSW, stock component. For this year, the Feale has had a 1C winter surplus of 544 fish and a multi-C winter surplus of 114. The run of salmon recorded on the fish counter over the 5-year period 2013 to 2017 was used to assess the salmon stock and provide scientific advice for 2018. Multi-C winter salmon caught between January the 1st and 31st May, returning after spending 2 years at sea. These older fish are largely and usually return in the springtime and are often referred to as spring salmon.
All right, Minister, we'll come back to you. Deputy Ferris.
Councillor, I got no script. There's no script provided.
There's a script available, Minister. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I just want to get back to the IFI's suggestion and the scientific report. I'm not going to argue here, Minister. That's based on a counter by a fish pad that is put in place. That's around 6 to 8 foot wide of a 100-metre span of a river. And there are other fish pads. There are actually 2 other fish pads that there is no counters on. And also you have 2 other rivers, tributaries that are running into into the river itself. You have the Brick and you have the Gailey running into it as well. And obviously there is no counters on them. So effectively what you're doing, that has been suggested here, is to close this fishery on the pretext for 1 year. I know very well if it closes for 1 year, that's the end of it. Because all that area, first of all, you had the driftmen outside, now you have the draftmen, and that's another traditional fishery that will be gone from that part of our country. So I don't accept for 1 minute this scientific analysis based on the type of year that we had when you had flooding in the river and any time in a high tide with a 100-metre span, there was bound to be fish passing up down, and 15% could not be accurate in that regard. So, Minister, what's the intention of this government? Is this going to continue? We've had a number of post offices closed in Kerry recently. Now we have another sector that's probably going to become obsolete as well, going to be left to die. I think that if there's an agenda here to close that fishery, and I suspect that's the case, and if that agenda is to close the fishery by putting this type of scientific evidence in front of us, can you tell me, Minister, has there been any effort to restock the river? Has the IFI made any effort to restock the river? That river, there's hatcheries in that river going back 40, 50 years ago. There are no hatcheries on the river now, so there is no intent for the survival of the salmon fishery in the river Cashin. And I just have to say that I'm awful disappointed, and I think Brendan would agree with me, that Minister Brendan Griffin will agree with me there, that you have another very, very traditional way of life for people who have generations been involved in it. That's hanging on the thread at the moment.
Thank you, Deputy. Minister, will you conclude on this matter, please?
Thank you, Deputy. And I don't question your local knowledge or the fishermen's local knowledge there. And I have been approached by a number of deputies along there. But what I would say to you is that there are issues maybe that you have raised in terms of the science or the counters or whatever that we have to deal with. But at the moment, the public consultation is now closed, and I presume that strong submissions have been put in on behalf of the anglers that you talk about on the points you have raised. They will be considered. I understand that the river Feale is now reaching between 50% and 100% of its conservation limit, and it was proposed in what was published that it would be catch and release for 2019. I don't know what your submissions are, and I won't try to influence what will come out of that. But I will say that I take on board what you're saying, but the IFI and the science is there, and what we have to do is we have to reflect that as well. I don't know what's going to happen in terms of the regulations for 2019. I don't know what submissions went in from locally from the anglers or from yourselves. But what I can say to you is that I'm just about 6 or 8 weeks into this department, and I would suggest, as we've done it up in Galway in the River Clare, we set up all of the angling associations came together to form a group called Corja Clár, to actually look at all the issues that they had there and come together with the IFI to come up with solutions. And I think we need to do that. And I have no problem in doing that in early January with you, to sit down with you and have a chat with you about that. But I think it's important that we have consultation, and that I know the IFI are there, they're a body that actually are there to protect, conserve and to make sure that there's fish there. You asked me the question, what have the IFI done in restocking? I'll find that out for you, Deputy.
Okay, thank you, Minister.